Hey, and welcome into FFCK. That's Fantasy Football with Corey and Kyle. We're kicking off our offseason content with missed calls that we had in 2024, and then kind of with a little bit of a prediction of what we see happening for these players in 2025. So the player we're going to start off with this year is Mahomie, Patrick Mahomes, and talking about how we kind of missed on him this year. Kyle, what did you think about Patrick Mahomes going into 2024?
They're coming into this season with, and this is pre D Hop, right? Kelsey, Marquise Brown, Xavier Worthy. I was like, hey, this team's going to be great. Patrick's going to have all these weapons to throw to. It's going to be crazy, right?
And you missed one player in there, Rashee Rice, even.
Rice, yes. And then Rashee Rice as well. You're right. Because I was just about to mention, early in the season, then Rashee Rice. Mahomes is the one that sniped him right in the knee.
So he sabotaged his own season.
So there's one weapon down. Then Hollywood gets hurt. Then Kelsey's playing like trash. And, they end up getting D-Hop. He didn't make any difference whatsoever. Like, he wasn't any more involved than Xavier Worthy was. And so, Mahomes threw the ball around a little bit. They ran the ball a lot more than people expected, I think. They weren't the high point total Chiefs that, we're kind of used to seeing. They were a little more ball control, a little more slowed down tempo, and so
they were barely squeezing out games, yeah.
Yeah, going into the season, I'm like, oh, he's going to skyrocket to the number one fantasy QB, easy. And I was way off. He was outside the top 10. I mean, you talk about disappointing.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about just kind of going into Mahomes' stats. First of all, he only rushed for 2 touchdowns all year, but he only threw, I say only, but he only threw for 26 touchdowns this year, which is, well, I'm looking. It ties the lowest of his entire career. You have to go all the way back to 2019, where he threw 26 touchdown passes. Mm-hmm. So, we're used to him throwing 35, 40 touchdowns a season. Yep. So that's really hurting him. He had, aside from that 2019, again, he had like a career low in even attempts and completions. He didn't have a lot of activity this year. And you kind of then go look at Kareem Hunt, who filled in at running back after Pacheco went down. And Kareem Hunt, with not even filling in for a full season, had his second highest rush attempts in a season in his entire career. He had 200 rush attempts this year. They were running the ball. And that's just Kareem Hunt. So that just tells you right there, they focused on running the ball a lot this year.
And I think a big reason for that is because it's probably the best defense they've had in Kansas City since Patrick Mahomes has been QB there. And so they didn't need him, between a good defense and the Zebras, didn't need him to throw 40 touchdowns this season. They could afford to play ball control and run it a little bit more and slow down that tempo, because they were having an easier time controlling games when their opponents weren't throwing up a ton of points on them either.
Here's the thing, though, is usually it's the opposite. Kansas City's putting up big points. The other team is trying to stay on the field as long as possible, keep the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands, and it seems like they almost did that for the other team this year, and instead they struggled and were barely winning games. And then here we are, they're in the Super Bowl again. How annoying is that?
Half their games were like one play away from going the other direction.
And they play like absolute trash all year. All we could talk about is how lucky they are, how they don't look good, and here they are in the Super Bowl again. I mean, it does help having the Zebras on your side. That's beside the point, though. It's still hard to win football games, and here they are doing it. And
Not just the Zebras. I think Josh Allen's a double agent, but that's a
he's
story
in
for
on
another
it for sure. I mean, at this point, I'm just hoping they beat the Eagles because hate the Eagles. So,
Yeah.
um, so looking going forward into 2025, I know they still haven't played this Super Bowl or anything, and we're not sure what's going to happen with Hollywood this offseason. Heck, we're not even sure what's going to happen with Rashee Rice, which kind of makes me nervous going forward. I think Kelsey will be back. And of course, then they have Worthy. But moving forward, I'm nervous about Patrick Mahomes because it seems to be trending downwards. Like I think it kind of started last year, and I think it just continued this year. And I think next year, when they have Isaiah Pacheco healthy, I think he's a much better running back than Kareem Hunt. So I think they're going to use him as much as they possibly can. And so I think they're going to continue to run the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a chance Hunt's not even back with the team because Pacheco will be healthy.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Rashee Rice, like you said, between the injury and then a possible suspension, we have no idea what's going to happen there next year. I can't remember off the top of my head what D Hop's contract situation is. I think he might still have a year left, but Hollywood only signed a 1 year deal.
Yep.
Like you said, no guarantee he'll be back. So the weapons are iffy. So it depends a lot on what happens, not just on offense, but on defense too, and free agency and the draft. And do they get better? Do they lose anybody that makes them weaker where they have to throw a lot more? But I am not optimistic to see him take much of a leap, if any, next year. I think he'll be right in that 9 to 12 range that he fell this year, probably.
Yep.
And yeah, there's a lot better quarterbacks I'd rather draft next year. Now, if you're one of those that likes to wait on QB, he's a nice late target. You know, kind of like people this year were waiting. Kyler Murray was kind of your darling. He finished higher than Mahomes, who went. Mahomes was going a lot earlier. He finished in the top 10, barely, but he did. And so next year Mahomes might be able to be that because that recency bias, people are going to be upset that he had such a bad year. So you'll be able to get him at a discount next year. And so it might pay off to wait.
Yeah. And you mentioned Kyler finishing higher than him. Just to be fair, a lot of players this year, a lot of QBs were inconsistent. And Kyler's another one of those. I know this video isn't about him, but looking at Mahomes and his scoring throughout the season, it was consistent. You didn't know week in or week out which one was going to be a good scoring game where he's getting you 30 points or he's only going to get you maybe, 16. You didn't know. You couldn't predict what that game plan was going to be. And that's frustrating. Now, going back again, I was talking about trends. In 2022, he kind of had this outlier season where he finished number 1 overall. 428 points where I'm looking here. But then in 2023, 294 points. And then in 2024, again, 294 points. He was within 0.2 points. So very consistent there. So it seems like that's more of where he's going to be at consistently, which is, like you said, kind of that 9 to 12 range. So that's what I'm expecting again in 2025 for him also.
Yep, same.
All righty. Well, I'm sorry if you had Patrick Mahomes this year and he let you down. Just don't let it happen again next year.